Artillery is often called the decisive arm of the battlefield. It doesn't win wars alone, but it makes everything else possible. It breaks enemy defenses, stops counterattacks, and turns strong points into ruins. In World War II, no army embraced artillery more completely than the United States Army. American commanders believed that if they could deliver enough firepower fast enough, they could defeat any position, no matter how well defended. But there was a problem that every artillery officer understood. A gun is only powerful when it arrives on time. In the early years of the war, heavy artillery was still tied to old limitations. Huge cannons could fire shells for miles, but they moved like weapons from another century. Some armies still relied on horses. Others used trucks that struggled in mud, deep sand, or cratered ground. In fast-moving warfare, the battle often moved beyond the reach of the guns before they were even set up. Germany's blitzkrieg proved what modern war demanded: speed. Tanks and motorized infantry could advance rapidly, but artillery, especially heavy artillery, often lagged behind. Even the German army, famous for its mechanized warfare, depended on enormous numbers of horses to pull much of its artillery. It worked, but it limited mobility and made resupply and repositioning difficult. The United States looked at this problem and came to a different conclusion than Germany did. America didn't just need stronger guns. It needed artillery that could move like armor, not someday, immediately. And to make that possible, the U.S. Army built a machine that almost no one talks about today, but without it, American artillery dominance would have been impossible. The M4 high-speed tractor. It wasn't a tank. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't fire shells on its own. It didn't lead assaults or appear in propaganda posters. But it did something just as important. It gave America's heaviest guns legs. To understand why the M4 mattered, you have to understand the ancient weakness of heavy artillery. For centuries, big guns were naturally static. You brought them forward slowly, placed them carefully, fired them from prepared positions, and moved them only when you absolutely had to. That might work in slow wars, but World War II was not slow. Armies moved quickly, fronts shifted, and defensive lines collapsed or reformed in hours. Meanwhile, artillery positions were constantly hunted by reconnaissance aircraft and targeted by counter-battery fire. If your guns stayed in one location too long, the enemy would find you, calculate your firing position, and hit you with shells. This meant artillery needed not only firepower, but survival tactics. And the best survival tactic is movement. Today, armies call it shoot and scoot, fire a mission, move before the enemy responds. In 1942 and 1943, the U.S. Army began turning this concept into standard practice, but it required a machine strong enough to haul heavy artillery across rough ground, cratered roads, and broken bridges. That machine was the M4. The M4 high-speed tractor was a fully tracked prime mover designed to tow America's biggest and most valuable guns. It was built for speed, but even more than speed, it was built for traction and reliability. It could go where wheeled trucks couldn't, through mud, over rubble, across ground chewed up by artillery, and the way it was designed revealed something very American about the war. Instead of reinventing everything, the U.S. used standardization and proven components. The M4 was based heavily on the chassis of the M3 Stuart light tank family. That was a smart decision. The suspension was rugged, already in mass production, and easy to maintain. It meant parts could be shared. Mechanics could repair it with familiar tools. It reduced chaos in the supply chain. At the heart of the tractor was a gasoline engine powerful enough to haul a heavy gun while still moving faster than traditional artillery tractors. And its weight distribution was ideal for towing. It wasn't built like a civilian tractor. It was a military machine built to drag steel through hell. But the M4 wasn't just a towing vehicle. It was designed around the artillery crew. This is the detail that separates it from many other support vehicles of the era. An artillery gun is operated by a team. A heavy gun crew could be 10 men or more, and those men had to arrive with the weapon. They also had to arrive ready to fight, not exhausted from marching miles behind the gun. The M4 solved that. Its large forward compartment could carry the gun crew inside the vehicle, protected from weather fatigue and some small arms danger. It meant that when the tractor arrived at a new firing position, the crew arrived with it, not 30 minutes later, and at the rear of the vehicle was a large storage area designed to carry ammunition. Not enough for a full battle, but enough to start firing immediately. That mattered more than people realize. Because artillery fights time. When a unit calls for fire support, it doesn't need shells in an hour. It needs shells now. The M4 made sure that when the gun arrived, it could go into action quickly, with crew and initial ammunition ready to work. And because war is never predictable, the M4 also carried a defensive weapon, a ring-mounted 50 caliber Browning machine gun, the same heavy machine gun trusted across the American military. It gave the crew a way to defend themselves against infantry threats and even low-flying aircraft in emergencies. This was not a luxury. It was survival, because even the best artillery tractor could become a target on the road. Now, what guns did the M4 actually tow? The answer tells you exactly why it mattered. The M4 was designed to haul some of the heaviest and most important artillery pieces in the American arsenal. One of them was the famous 150 mm field gun, known to American crews as the Long Tom. The Long Tom was not a normal artillery weapon. It was heavy, powerful, and accurate. It could throw a large shell tremendous distances, with deadly effect, striking enemy supply points, command centers, and defensive positions far behind the front. But the Long Tom was only valuable if it could be positioned where it was needed. The M4 made that possible. It could haul the Long Tom forward as armored divisions advanced. It could reposition the gun when the front shifted. And it could move the battery to avoid counter-battery fire. This meant American heavy artillery was no longer a slow, moving weapon locked to prepared rear positions. It became something much more dangerous, a mobile heavy punch that could follow the army, and that changed how battles were fought. Imagine being a German commander in 1944. You set up a strongpoint in a village. You dig in, you prepare for a direct assault. But instead of a costly infantry attack, American heavy guns arrive faster than you expect. They set up, begin firing, and your defenses are hit with accurate shelling from miles away. Before you can adjust, the guns move again. Your counter-battery crews struggle to locate them. It is firepower that refuses to sit still. That is what the M4 enabled. This ability to displace quickly fire, and displace again, gave American artillery a kind of battlefield dominance that was both physical and psychological. It meant German defenders could never be sure where the heavy guns were. It meant safe positions stopped being safe. And it mattered in every theater. In Italy, the terrain was brutal. Mountain roads were narrow, steep cratered, and often destroyed by retreating forces. Wheeled vehicles struggled. But tracked machines like the M4 could claw forward, hauling heavy guns where they had no business being. In France, after the Normandy breakout, speed became everything. As American armies surged forward, heavy artillery had to keep up. It wasn't enough for tanks to break through. Infantry and supply lines had to be protected, and strongpoints had to be smashed quickly. The M4 ensured that heavy guns could follow the advance, providing deep fire support that could destroy German positions before they slowed the momentum. And it wasn't just the Americans who benefited. Through Allied cooperation and wartime supply programs, M4 tractors were provided to other forces as well, strengthening the mobility of heavy artillery across the Allied coalition. Then came the final proof of the M4's design. After the war ended, many military vehicles disappeared quickly. They were worn out, too specialized, or too expensive to keep. But the M4 didn't vanish. Thousands of surplus tractors were sold to civilian industries like logging and construction. Other nations kept them in service for years. In some cases, decades. A machine designed under wartime urgency became valuable in peacetime because it was built the same way America built many of its wartime tools: simple, strong, overbuilt, reliable. The M4 high-speed tractor was not the kind of weapon people celebrate. It didn't have the fame of a Sherman tank or the fear factor of a Tiger. It didn't dominate posters or documentaries. It didn't fire the shells that made it famous. But without it, many of those shells would never have reached the battlefield in time. It was a force multiplier, one of the machines that turned American artillery into a fast, moving, modern weapon system rather than a slow, moving burden. And in a war where mobility decided campaigns, that mattered as much as any tank. The truth is, World War II was not won only by dramatic weapons and famous commanders. It was won by systems, by logistics, by reliability, by the ability to move guns, ammunition, and men faster than the enemy could react. The M4 high-speed tractor represents that reality perfectly. An unglamorous machine doing an essential job, pulling the weight of victory forward, mile after mile. So here's a question worth asking. When you think of the most important vehicles of World War II, what comes to mind? Tanks, fighters, battleships? Or is it the support machines, the tractors, trucks, and haulers that made the famous weapons unstoppable? Tell us in the comments. What do you think was the most underrated but essential support vehicle of World War II? And if you want more deep dives into the forgotten machines and real tactics that shaped the war, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.